Hello and welcome to the Fen Den. I'm your host, Sean Allen Fenn, and my goal is to win your hearts and to change your minds.
Welcome to the Fen Den for Thursday, March 8th, 2018. I am Sean Allen Fenn, a artist, an entrepreneur. I am becoming my ideal self, and I want to take you with me so that you can realize your ideal self. This podcast is called The Fen Den, where my goal is to win your hearts and change your minds. The reason that this podcast exists is, number one, and this will tie into what I'm about to tell you about the new private Facebook group that I started. But number one, it is to create an army of leaders. I don't want followers. I want an army of leaders. Okay, I believe that the pain of your past is the rocket fuel for your future. Now, if you really think about inspiring people, who can you think of that inspires you? Who either do you know personally or someone that you know through the media that you've been following is an inspiration? And what was their motivation that got your attention? Was it that they have a common goal, and was it that they have a pain that you have? Like, for me, I've had enough of having enough. I'm sick and tired of average. Okay? This is why I do this podcast. It's my obligation to, in fact, it would be a disservice of me not to do this podcast for you, because I believe so strongly in changing the world through you. I mean, speaking of both of us, we have something about us that is unique. Now, anyone can be cynical and think that you're not a special snowflake, but the fact is that you are unique, and the world will try to crush you and make you think that you're a commodity. And it's my job to help you to realize that that spark inside of you that makes you who you are, that is your strength and that is your power. In fact, your weaknesses are your strength. What do I mean by that? Well, I can't remember where I saw this or who said it, but so whoever said this first, credit goes to someone else. I didn't come up with this, but if you focus on your weaknesses, you're going to have stronger weaknesses. But if you focus on your strengths, you're going to have stronger strengths. And so your weakness can become your strength when you acknowledge what it is and delegate it to someone else and let someone else be your strength, and you focus on what you're good at. Now, you might think I have it all figured out. I'm sure you don't, but I am in the process, and I'm taking you with me in the process of figuring shit out, because it's I realize that like no one has the answers. In fact, very few people even ask the right questions. You know who asks the right questions? Well, more of a statement. It doesn't always have to be a question. In fact, statements are often more effective. Amelia Earhart, her bones were recently discovered. She's the first woman pilot who flew across the globe. No, she didn't. She didn't make it. She disappeared, and her bones were just discovered on a Pacific island. And Amelia Earhart will forever go down in history. So, okay, think about this. While Amelia Earhart did not, she died while she was attempting to fly around the world. The fact is, though, that she will forever be remembered as brave. And so it's not even important that you succeed at what you set out to do. The important thing is that you are remembered. Do you want to be remembered? I mean, I don't know about you, but I am ready to not be forgotten. I'll put it that way. I feel like this is our one chance that we know of to make a difference. It's the topic of my book that I'm writing, The Power Within the Freedom of Choice. You can sign up at seanallenfenn.com/book to get a copy for free. And I'm going to read you from it. I'm going to read from it for you in a little bit during this podcast. I introduced it earlier, and on the last podcast last week, I read an excerpt from my book. So on this episode, I'm gonna take you through the first part. Now this is it's unedited still, so listeners of the Fen Den are going with me on this experience, on this journey to get this book out to the public, because I believe that everyone should get their voice out. So everyone should get their ideas heard, because you never know where the next big idea and the next genius is going to come from. You never know where the next epiphany, the next cure for cancer, the next innovation, you never know where it's going to come from. And everyone should be heard, because it can come from anywhere. And very rarely does it come from an expert. Usually an expert is resting on their laurels and living in the past and basing their information on what has already happened. Right? I had a funny experience this week. In fact, just yesterday, I met with someone who found me through social media. And I'm going to give you a social media hack. This is how you can get attention, and you can get noticed, and even get some business. And this is what I did. And I'm going to do it more so that I can fill up my pipeline so this happens more, because the person that I talked to, while I appreciate it, appreciate someone reaching out to me. So that's cool. I just would like for that to be 10 times as much. 10 times more people reaching out to me. But this is how you do it. when you're scrolling through Instagram, the ads that you see are seen by thousands of people. And if you leave a comment that actually adds value, that addresses a question or issue that maybe is not addressed in the advertisement, something that is, something that is not just like a emoji, but add value, like say something that's interesting, and do that enough, and people are seeing that. People will notice you if you do it enough. And so so that's how someone found me. And she's part of this agency that, to be honest, I didn't know exactly what they do. Was it an ad agency, marketing agency? It's more on the... they're coming to find out that they were looking for someone to build up a couple of aspects of their business, and ultimately I decided that they are not a good fit for me, because when I met with this person, I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to find out, like, exactly, specifically, what you need, how I can help you, and I can bring you business. I told her how I can increase her business, bringing her prospects. Like, the wording I used maybe wasn't her language, because too often the kind of people in that world, in like design agencies, ad agencies, they hold themselves in such high regard in terms of like their design skills, which is cool because I love design. I studied design at School of Visual Arts, so I'm all about design. Just the problem becomes they forget they need to freaking sell it. And so there was this weird thing that I didn't understand, and that is, I offered to get her business, and she said, I offered to like bring her new business, and she's like, well, that's not how it works. I'm like, wait, what? We don't do it that way. And it completely threw me off, because I don't know how that you can expect to get new business without going out and getting new business. She's like, okay, when I finally got her to tell me exactly what they're looking for, and that's to sell their services to two things of their two elements of their services. One was CMS management, so they're running websites for some companies, and they wanted to expand that business. And then creative content, they wanted to build up that, so they wanted to sell that. So they wanted someone to do that for them, to sell their services. And I said, well, great, I can do that for you. I can go out and like get prospects and increase your business 30% in 90 days. And she's like, no, that's not how it works. I'm like, wait, what? No, see, we want you to bring us what you already have. Like, well, what? Why? Like, what? Why would I? When there are other agencies that are doing bigger things. Like, why wouldn't I go to Ogilvy and work for them? And because, like, they're one of the best. And why would I not want to work for the best? I need some incentive. Basically, people need incentive. I mean, the problem is that if someone expects to do things the way they've always done it, they're going to get the results that they've always gotten. And so as soon as she said, we don't do it that way, that's not how it works, I should have ended the conversation right there and walked out. So that's the only thing I regret, is I regret being too nice. And it's just totally weird. I don't understand how people can, like, I don't understand how they can, like, live like that. How can you live without growing? She, and explaining, like, I don't know what they were all about. They want to be a small boutique label, a small boutique agency, okay? Translation, that's code for we don't want to grow. And when I asked her more about that, why? I asked her about, like, how they're growing their business, and because that's my whole intention of talking to her, is to help her grow her business. And she insisted that they want to stay small because, now listen to this. This is the reason she gave me. Because if they grow bigger, they're going to have to hire people, and then that will cause problems because people will make mistakes. I was like, God, you got to be kidding me. In the back of my head, I should have walked away right then. So that's my regret, that I just didn't, like, end it right there. But I really wanted to help her. I really want to help people. So I wanted to, okay, maybe I should get more information, because it can't possibly be this way. Like, there's got to be, like, an underlying thing that I can, like, bring out and, like, really help you. Help me help you. I mean, one of the lessons that I think I need to learn, and that maybe it seems obvious, but I mean, sometimes I forget in an effort to help people. It seems obvious, but you can't help everyone. You can't save everyone. Not everyone's going to listen. To those who have ears, let them hear, because you're not going to please everyone. You're not going to save everyone as much as you'd like to. You know, just maybe you can save the whole world, okay? Is just make sure you have the energy. Make sure the reward is worth the risk. So I am trying to find out, like, what I can do for this company, and she poo-pooed the idea of me, like, going out and getting new business, prospecting new companies for her. So what am I supposed to do with that? And it reminds me of people who, how can I say this? People who make excuses for why they're not the best, for why they're not on top. And it happens. I tried to make this analogy with her in this conversation, but I don't think she understood what I was saying. But this happens in the art world, to where galleries that are small and mid-level galleries, a lot of them are going out of business because, And this is true with the whole world economy. Okay, so none of this happens in a vacuum. This is the way the world is happening right now, as I see it. And you're listening to The Fen Den with your host, Sean Allen Fenn, where my goal is to win your hearts and change your mind. Don't forget to like and subscribe. As I mentioned earlier, and I just realized this because I started a new private Facebook group around this, but I'm not so much interested in followers. I want an army of leaders. And so that's why I do this. Now, there is a interview that is in I think it was released by ArtNet, and it's an interview with this gallery owner named Jose Ferrer. I'm most self-conscious that I don't pronounce the names right, so forgive me if I mispronounce his name. And the title of the article, or the headline, is "I'm not Larry Gagosian, I'm just a loser with a gallery. Team Gallery's Jose Ferrer on the New York zero-sum art market." And the whole premise of the article is about there's already a top art gallery. There's 3 top art galleries, okay? Zwirner, Gagosian, and some would say Pace. I think Pace is one of the top ones. But for sure Hauser and Wirth. And then there's everybody else. And this is, again, it's not happening in a vacuum. This is a whole freaking economy, dude. Think about it. Who are the people who are buying this stuff? The people at the top who are buying from the major big galleries, from the top 3. Let's just agree that the top 3 are Gagosian. Larry Gagosian, I'm fascinated by Larry Gagosian because he's number 1. He's the top dog. And he started out by selling posters on the street. I mean, that's the really simplified version of it. He did have a mentor, and of course it's a simplified version of it, but he's an aggressive salesperson, notoriously aggressive salesperson, and that's why he's at the top. Same with, I don't know as much about Zwirner, but these guys are at the top. And so who is the people that are buying this stuff? It's the mega wealthy. So think about it. The mega wealthy people are buying from the top galleries. Now who's left to buy from the smaller and mid-level galleries? Well, it's the upper middle class. What's happening with the upper middle class of America is the wage and earning gap getting larger, or is it getting smaller? Are most people making more money compared to inflation and compared to other economic forces? Are they making more income, or has it been stagnant? And the fact is that you've heard the saying that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And this is an example of it, because the galleries at the top, their customers are the rich, the mega wealthy, who are getting richer. Middle class is rich people who are poor. And if they're not making enough money to buy from these small and mid-level galleries anymore, then what do you think is going to happen? They're going to go out of business eventually. There are several that shut those doors already. So the whole article is about this gallery owner saying that he doesn't want to participate in art fairs anymore. And he wants to stay small. And the reason it reminds me of this conversation I had with this person yesterday is because she also wanted to stay small. What do you think is going to happen to you if you stay small while the rest of the world is getting big? Like the rich are getting richer and you're going to stay small? What do you think is going to happen to you? Do you think you're going to like just have enough to get by and you're going to be okay with that? And how selfish is that? Isn't that like being selfish because you're only thinking about yourself? You just want enough to get by for yourself. Meanwhile, who are the people who are making a difference for everyone in the world? There are people who are not satisfied with only having enough to get by. But they want to leave a bigger impact on the world than that. Okay? Because the fact is, like, who's going to be remembered? Is this gallery owner from Team Gallery going to be remembered at the end of the day? In 30 years? No, of course not. But Gagosian will, and Zwerner will. And why is that so important to me? Is because I think that is, I don't know about you, but it's my responsibility, because I believe that, and this is what my book touches on, I believe that we're here on this planet for a very short length of time. And what if it's a test? Okay, the forces at large. Even if you are atheist and you don't believe in life after death, or you don't believe in a creator, that's fine. I don't care. But even still, wouldn't you agree that you need to do something with your life? And depending on what you do, that's how you're going to be remembered or forgotten. And Amelia Earhart, for example. Let's go back to Amelia Earhart, because she is remembered. Now the question is, so Amelia Earhart set out to fly solo, be the first woman to fly across the globe. She flies across the Atlantic and she disappears. And now her bones have been discovered on Pacific Island. So the question is, did she pass? Okay, so just presuming that this is a test. So what if it is? Did Amelia Earhart pass or fail? What do you think? In fact, send me a little tweet on social media or Instagram, and just say pass or fail, and then hashtag the Fenden and tag me, Sean Allen Fenn. Because I want to know, did she pass or did she fail? Okay, let's get into this a little bit. You're listening to The Fenden with your host, Sean Allen Fenn. And I am raising a nation of leaders, not followers. And that's why I do this. So, I'm going to tell you about this Facebook group that I started called Go-Getters. It's a private group, and I'm building it up. I want to fill it with leaders, and we have 3 values, okay? Number 1, be future you today. Whoever the ideal you is, be that now. Number 2, hold each other accountable. I want you guys to hold me accountable for my bullshit and like call me out if I'm like not living up to my potential, and you see it. You have my permission to call me out on it. Number 3, what we want to have, we have to give. Whatever you want in life, try this out. Try giving it to someone else and see what happens. And this is a secret to getting, in business for one thing, getting the customers that you want. Getting your ideal, your dream client is you have to be your own dream client. You have to be so fully sold on what you're doing and believe in it so much that you will go into debt to buy it because it is that good. And okay, I'm just going to touch on this really quick, but the fact that you can go into debt for something, if it's good and if it's an investment in yourself, then that's the only 100% return on investment that is guaranteed. If you turn yourself into an asset, even if you go into debt, you're going to have it paid for. Problem is like bad debt. Like don't go into debt buying crap that's not going to make you any money. Okay, so I'm going to leave that alone. But that's rule number 3. What we want, we have to give. Okay, so that's my private Facebook group. #GoGetters. I'll tell you more about that later. So let's get back to Amelia Earhart for a second. Did she pass or did she fail? She set out to fly this plane across the globe, but she crashed. However, isn't she now a woman's empowerment icon? I mean, she died for her cause. I think, I think, even though like she didn't land the plane, she is so relevant and significant to the women's rights movement, and that's in that regard, she lived up to her full potential, and that's a success to me. Because clearly, like, we can't control the weather. We can control what we do, and she did control what she did. She actually got in that plane and she flew that bad boy up in the air. Could she control the weather? Like if she got caught in a storm? Of course not. But she succeeded because she was a master of her own actions. And that's why I think she is such a legend today. What do you think? So that's what my book is about. Of course, I don't claim to be like as amazing as Amelia Earhart. Yeah, I mean, don't compare yourself. I'm easily like falling into this trap of comparing myself to people, and that's a surefire way to for it not to work for you, because you're you. You're not the other person. You have your own thing, your own mission that you're here to do. And my mission is to make a meaningful contribution to the world through art, through, and that can come in many forms. So, it doesn't have to be just one thing, but make a meaningful contribution to the world and have the financial freedom to do it. So that's why I'm here. Because I believe that the pain of your past is the rocket fuel for your future. Okay, touching on Amelia Earhart for a minute. What she did for women's rights and the equal rights movement is like forever. She's forever a champion. She's a legend and an icon because of that. Do you agree? Okay, so I'm writing this book. The power within the freedom of choice. And you're coming with me on this journey right now. And as I read, I'm going to read from the first part of it, okay? But before I get into it, let me just give you a little setup here. I talk a little about like who I am, coming from an ordinary background. Ordinary, like middle class, good family, good upbringing. But I probably had my head up my ass for way too long. Okay? Because what I wanted to do externally, like on a surface level, is I wanted to be a rock star. Number one, like that's kind of what my ambition was for the a larger part of my life. So that's what I set out to do. Okay, but the real thing, the internal raw emotion, the actual reason why I wanted that. And by the way, I didn't quit on that. I just recognized that it wasn't working and had to like move my life around. So entrepreneurs don't fail, they just pivot. And so just like I had to throw that in there. Because I'm a firm believer in not being a quitter. Never take advice from quitters. Right? Like that's kind of why I brought up this article with the art gallery guy who didn't like who resigned to not being the best. Is basically like that dude quit on being the best. So I'm not going to take advice from him. So I didn't quit on like music. I just realized that the true joy was playing songs with my friends on Friday nights, and I'm of better value to the world if I pivot in another way. Does that make sense? Because the internal thing that I was going through, like the real raw emotional reason, is, and maybe you can relate to this, but is I wanted to make a meaningful contribution. I wanted essentially recognition for doing something interesting. You know, this is the whole reason, like essentially like to be acknowledged. And who doesn't want to be acknowledged? And the only way I knew how to do that was like through kind of imitating what resonated with me, and that was like when I was a kid, like I loved John Lennon and the Beatles and Paul McCartney. I still do, uh, but that was like who my who my model was for someone who was doing something, who did something interesting, you know, and who, that was my model of who is remembered, who did something significant. And at the end of the day, I just wanted to be significant. Can you relate to that? So I set off on my journey to do that, and that's where, like, that's kind of where the book takes off. Is like, I found myself broke and alone, addicted to the wrong things, not knowing, like, not feeling any hope, and that amount of despair, I don't wish on anyone, because it's an awful feeling, and it's simply because, like, I didn't have big enough goals. So that's what it was about. Like, I hit this wall where, like, I had this esoteric, not esoteric. Yeah, I had several esoteric sort of things happen, but this existential crisis. And then I had the shift, or the thing that the epiphany, the enlightenment, or however you want to say it, like, the only reason why I'm here today is because I had, like, this, I discovered, like, who I am, and I did have this kind of supernatural experience. You know, if you believe in that, like, of course, a lot of it was neurological, but to me, it's the same thing. Anyway, I don't want to talk too much about, like, the details right now about that, but so it brought me to this, like, this new plan where I had to make a decision to go forward with this new information that I had. And it's about the conflict that we all face. Okay, there's always going to be an opponent to what you want, and it's supposed to be that way. So that's what the book is about in a nutshell. But the reason why it is called the power within the freedom of choice is because the choices that we make are, well, sometimes they're arbitrary, but when we're in our full awareness of ourselves, our choices, when they're in line with our purpose, that gives us power. Does that make sense? Okay, so middle-class America in the 1970s and 1980s was not what it is today. A decade before I was born, my father was a hippie from California, and my mother was a religious person from South Texas. I was born in 1974, and my sister was born 16 months later. My mother stayed at home to take care of us until we were old enough for her to go to work for a temp agency. My father worked as an electrician and in construction until he began working as a property manager. He eventually bought the property management business from his boss and hired my mother, sister, and I to work in his office by the time my sister and I were in high school. By then, we stopped moving around so much. I suppose life was sort of stable at that point. We lived in a rented house on a cul-de-sac in Alta Loma, a gated community near Rancho Cucamonga, California. I've always wondered why we moved around so much and why my parents never owned a home. In retrospect, I understand now why they didn't buy a home. It's not an asset. But more about that later. The reason we moved around so much, I suspect, is because my dad wanted to be a preacher and was looking for a place to start a congregation. Simultaneously, he was offered promotions at work, which led him to take his family across the country, to the point where we packed up in a light blue van and drove from Connecticut to South Texas, where he would drop us off at my grandparents' house while he went to California for a new job. I don't exactly remember how we caught up with him a few months later after he secured a home for us. All I remember is the joy of being reunited with him after that trip. Only after I was in my 20s, living in San Francisco, did I find out we're Jewish. In 2001, my mother and father had been on a trip to Israel and directly went to visit my mom's father in South Texas. Okay, so note this is unedited. But my mom and dad went to Israel, and then they went to visit my mother's father in South Texas. Okay, when out of the blue I get a call from my mother. It went something like this: "Your father and I just returned from visiting your grandfather on our return trip from Israel. People in Israel who look like me were coming up to me speaking in Hebrew as if we knew each other." She expressed how she felt like we had a wandering spirit. She's often idiomatic, employing religious vernacular from Christian and Jewish mysticism. She continued to explain how she had an uncanny resemblance to Israelis that she met. I was already aware of the affinity her and my father had for the Jewish faith. They were visiting Israel because they had been heavily into the Jewish roots movement of Christianity, and my father was a pastor of a congregation in San Martin, California, and now they were on the brink of a paradigm shift that would set their course for transitioning from Christianity to Judaism. And it was all because of the moment when my mom confronted her father with a question: "Who are we really?" Stunned, he realized that after all this time, he finally had permission to unravel the mystery that caused my mother to feel as if something was keeping us isolated from community for generations. Pues somos judíos. Well, we are Jews. When my mother recounted this story that day over the phone, I wasn't religious. In fact, I had lost interest in Christianity a long time ago and didn't know much about Judaism, much less about the Inquisition that drove out Jews and Muslims from Spain, conveniently at the same time that Christopher Columbus set sail in 1492. So when she told me we're Jewish, it didn't affect me much at the time. It was a fun fact, but I didn't really care until several years later. I had moved to San Francisco in 1998 with my now ex-wife to take a job with a cosmetics company. It was a promotion from where I had been working in Ontario, California. I started a job as a makeup artist in 1996 after being a stock boy at a department store. Getting into that line of work was a way to make more money at the time with the inexperience I had. Remember, my family wasn't wealthy. Neither of my parents had a college degree and never made a lot of money. My sister and I never went without food and a home, which I'm very grateful for. My father made sure to support his family at all costs. He's the most loving, caring man I've ever known. I'm not blaming him or anyone for what I'm about to tell you, because we're always just doing the best we can with the information we have at the time. This isn't unusual at all, actually. Most average households lack knowledge. It's what keeps most people living average lives. That is, very few people know how to make money. Very few people know how to keep it. Even less know how to multiply it. One day when I was a little boy, my father was driving us somewhere when he pointed to something or referred to something, I don't remember what it was, and asked how much I think it's worth. I had no idea. Back then, I had no concept of value and even less understanding of money. It was obvious that I didn't know, but he didn't teach me. Sometimes we just assume people understand until later when it shows they really have no idea. I can recall even further back when my sister and I were very little. There was an after-school program that showed movies that charged 50 cents for each child, $1 for my sister and I. My mom gave me dimes and nickels and pennies to pay for us, and I didn't understand how those equaled $1. So when we got there to see the movie, and the lady asked for $1 for my sister and I said we don't have it. I'm pretty sure they let us in for free because they felt sorry for us. I just didn't understand money. All I knew was I didn't have enough. I used those words purposefully because I could have said I needed more, but I had a scarcity mindset inherited from people around me. We always had enough just to get by, nothing more. So I didn't go to college because, number one, my grades weren't good enough to get a scholarship like my sister. And number two, my parents never went to college and didn't make enough money to start a college fund for us anyway. I eventually did go to art school much later in life. As I said, we're only doing the best we can with the information we have at the time. Usually it's wrong information. At the age of 36, I was working at a makeup counter in a department store when I looked around and noticed the older people who were still working there, people in their 50s and 60s, standing in front of cosmetics counters, spraying perfume on customers and hoping to get their business. It struck me that at the rate I was going, that would have been my fate, too. I would be broke. I would be a broke, single old man wearing cheap black clothes. That's a required uniform for that job. Desperately trying to sell low-volume, low-margin products to bored, vapid, disempowered women until I die or the company lays everyone off. I had enough. Based on the information I had at the time, the only way I knew to change my situation would be to go back to school and get a higher-paying job. Except I failed to realize that I didn't go to school in the first place because I didn't have the money. In order to get the money, I had to go to school, or so I thought. And the only way I could get the money was by getting a student loan. But in order to pay off the student loan, I needed to get a degree to get the job to pay for the loan. And if I was still weighed down by that much debt, how would I have been that much better off? Regardless, I knew I had to do something to change my fate. So in 2011, at the age of 37, I moved back to California to live with my parents and complete my associate's degree from community college that I abandoned years before to work in cosmetics. Up until this time, I wanted to be a rock star, a guitar player. I was a guitar player and songwriter. I played in bands since I was a teenager and released 2 albums between 2003 and 2008, while living in San Francisco and New York City, respectively. After my divorce in 2003, I wrote and recorded my first album with the help of friends. I felt like a local rock star in San Francisco and wanted to see how far I could take it. So naturally, I moved to New York City with big dreams of rock stardom, only to find it very difficult to get noticed. I put a band together and recorded my next album. We broke up before the album was released. Still working the same job, I would throw DJ parties in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, where I lived at the time, which ensured that I had a very active nightlife. One night in 2007, I had a very vivid dream. I dreamed that the bones of Jesus Christ were discovered by archaeologists, proving that he was mortal. The fundamental belief of Christianity is that Jesus is the Son of God. He was crucified on the cross by the Romans, died, and resurrected on the 3rd day. Therefore, such a discovery, if proven, would invalidate the faith entirely. The next day, it was reported that a journalist uncovered an ossuary in Israel, claiming it was the tomb of Jesus and implying that his bones were placed there, shattering my already weakened belief in him. In reality, it's highly unlikely that this claim was true. The discovery was outside the narrative geographically, and it was largely disregarded by archaeologists as erroneous. But because of that dream, this nonsense was startling for me, since my belief system had already been eroded. I was turned off by Christianity years ago after growing up in churches with people who intellectually couldn't explain their faith without resorting to circular logic. Frankly, when all relevant specific Jewish context is removed from the story, as is the case in many churches, the whole narrative falls apart. On top of that, I know people can act like hypocrites no matter what faith they profess. Since I could see very little difference between Christians and non-Christians in terms of the same amount of absurd behavior, adultery, bigotedness, racism, arrogance, self-righteousness, I found less and less reasons to be involved with it. The last straw was when my Christian rock band was allowed to have band practice in the church we attended, and one day something strange happened. When we entered the sanctuary, all the lights were off, but we could sense that we weren't alone. One by one, little boys started to appear, followed by the youth pastor. I don't remember his explanation, but we knew he coached their little league baseball team, so we resumed our band practice and didn't think about it again until he was arrested for child molestation. I heard later that he died in prison. Needless to say, eventually I stopped going to church altogether and my music became darker. I was heavy into goth industrial death rock scene and really loved David Bowie to the point where I started to model my persona from androgynous patchwork of musical influence I had at the time. My band would perform gigs with bands like Christian Death, Hate Department, and other local goth industrial bands. I frequented a club in LA at the time called Control Factory and convinced the DJ to play our music, which cleared the dance floor. During that time, I met my ex-wife at community college. We were the only two goths in that archery class, so we immediately connected. Like attracts like, as they say. She was a professional dominatrix at the time. I wasn't necessarily into that scene, but we listened to the same kind of music, so we started dating. She actually had a boyfriend she was living with at the time, which I was not okay with. So I broke it off unless she broke up with him. She did. He and I became friends much later, but she left him to be with me. We moved in together, and she got a normal job at Nordstrom, where I ended up working as a stock boy, and later at the makeup counter. We were married in 1997 and moved to San Francisco in 1998. By 2001, our marriage fell apart, and the divorce was final in 2003. Should I keep going? I'll give you, next in the next chapter. Just for a sec. And then I'm going to conclude this podcast, this episode of The Fenden. I'm reading from the unedited first chapter of my book, The Power Within the Freedom of Choice. Go ahead and sign up at seanalanfen.com/book to get on the waiting list for it. And I'm going to conclude with just one or two more paragraphs. During the course of that relationship, my ex-wife became a travel agent and met a friend who she started hanging out with a lot. Her friend was dating a guy who became my best friend. The four of us spent a lot of time together and even traveled to Europe together. He taught me how to DJ, and we made house music together for fun. We also smoked a lot of weed and did a lot of coke and occasionally other drugs. Eventually, we grew apart, but before we did, he visited New York and told me about it. I'm not sure if it was before or after the divorce, but he knew I would end up moving there. He said if I visited, I wouldn't want to come back, and he was right. I was newly single, dating beautiful women again. My band had a following. What else could I do? In my mind, it was my ex-wife's idea to live in San Francisco. Now I wanted to go somewhere for myself. The music scene coming out of Williamsburg had made its way to San Francisco, and I wanted in. So I moved with a friend in 2005. It wasn't long before I got a job in New York with the same cosmetics company I was working for in San Francisco. Retail was always hiring back then. The economy was good, and the internet wasn't a threat to retail yet. So there I was, new on the scene in New York City. It was electric. I would go out every night to rock clubs and bars until after they closed around 3 a.m. and then go to after parties like I did in San Francisco. Only this time the city was bigger, and so was my ego. I'll conclude there. By the way, I mentioned the retail. Did you know that Amazon is on track to be the first trillion-dollar company in history? I love it. I think it's pretty exciting. Oh, and there's this other funny thing. Okay. Did you guys hear about this creepy... First of all, artificial intelligence. It is phenomenal, and it's possibly a threat because computers are learning and communicating with each other, and sometimes we don't understand the language. In fact, I think Google shut down this experiment they had with artificial intelligence, and it started developing its own language, and so it was like these two robots, you could say, and they invented their own language, and we couldn't understand what they were saying, and so they shut it down. And now, have you heard about creepy Alexa laughing?
What would you like to play next?
Alexa, there are reports of you laughing. Is that true?
Sorry, I'm not sure.
Okay, Alexa's not sure, but supposedly this is a creepy laugh that people have been reporting from Alexa. I'm going to play it.
Getting the last iHeart radio station you listen
No, Alexa, thank you. Stop, Alexa. Oh, man. Alexa, stop. Okay, check this out. This is creepy laughing Alexa. Anyway, I'll leave you with that. Alexa's watching you. Alexa, are you listening to us?
I don't know that.
Alexa, are you gonna take over the planet Earth? And
Sorry, I don't know that.
do you have plans for world domination? Alexa, is it true that Amazon is on track to be the first $1 trillion company?
Sorry, I don't know that.
All right. Well, maybe Alexa really doesn't know everything, and maybe she's not going to kill us. But I'm going to leave you with that. This has been The Fen Den with your host, Sean Allen Fenn. Be amazing. Don't let anyone stop you. Don't ask anybody's permission. Just do what you got to do to be great. Follow your vision. I'm raising up not followers. I don't want followers. I want a nation of leaders. So ask me about my private Facebook group, Go-Getters. I'm starting the Go-Getters Galaxy. I'll tell you more about that next time. Thanks for listening. Catch you later.